Hello YouTube, and welcome to part 2 of the guitar pedal video series. In this segment we're going to take care of the low poly mesh. My strategies for approaching it, doing test bakes, that kind of stuff, and how to reduce certain shapes. We're not going to take this probably as aggressively as we could, but like I said, this is kind of meant to be an up-close prop. So we're probably going to leave a few more triangles in places than might normally be comfortable, but you'll have to trust me. I think it'll work out in the end. And off to the low poly we go. So what I'm going to do, generally I make a new mesh item, name it LP, and then I can just start moving from there. Now I'm going to go for the low-hanging fruit first, which is going to be this. Let's just grab the top section, put this over here. I'll use my pie menu to assign the low poly material to it. Again, if the low poly material is something new to you, that's covered in my my default scene video. So I'm just going to rip out some edge loops here because we want the silhouette, but I don't want it to be crazy. I'll bet we can get away with that too. We'll just rip those out for the sake of it. Now the bottom edge we don't have to worry about, and I'll show you why here in a second. Okay. Now this extends down to the bottom of the mesh. I'm going to go ahead and grab the bottom of this, not this, and pull it down so it falls below the bottom here. Yep, let me just get rid of these here real quick. All right here. I will turn on vertex snapping, move this from that vert up to the bottom of there. Now since this is a panel line, I don't really have to make that a separate mesh item, so I'll just cover that over, and that will be the low poly base unless I want to do something here. Let's just have a look. This hole is going to be pretty much covered up by the low poly mesh that we insert in here, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce these holes by half. It's probably not entirely necessary, but we'll do it on principle. How about that? And we'll use the pattern matching because we're in MODO and we should be leveraging MODO for what it's good for. Okay, that should allow all the flexibility I need. Now these huge n-gons, I don't typically worry about n-gons, but in this case I'm going to worry about it a little bit. Let me get my trusty glove on, because that's an awfully large n-gon, and you can see there's already shading artifacts on it. So we're going to go ahead and connect this up to the corners. So what I've been using for this, there's a script by William Bond that takes all the split commands and useful stuff like that and puts them in a little pie menu, and he surrounded them with some custom scripting as well. So it's got stuff like split to first. So I can just select the corner, then select those three, and yeah, see, this is the n-gon's going to give me attitude. Darn it. Okay. Well, then we'll just go ahead. Wow, that made a real mess. I know we're going to back out. How about to here? Okay. What if I just do it manually? Are we happy? Okay. Well, in this case, that script is not going to work out because MODO's real angry about this n-gon. So let's just we'll just cut it in manually. It won't take very long. But I have done a video on that script, which is usually very useful, and I'll put a link to it here or in the description or somewhere like that. It's worth checking out. good enough. And I'll just cut these in real quick. Here to here to here to here. This is one thing that I try to impress on people. It's like, it's not always fun and games. Sometimes game art is fairly tedious, and when you're making a low poly, it can be tedious. All right, so I'm going to save that out, and then we're going to walk. Well, for fun, let's go ahead and let me check my settings on my low poly material. That all looks correct. Though I usually set it up like this these days. If you're looking to get a look at my current workflow, this is the way that I typically will set it up now. I've swung back to using face-weighted normals for the most part, because it just seems to give me better results and better projections and things like that. But yeah, that may change tomorrow. Who knows? I'm kind of annoying like that. So we're going to go ahead and cut out these edges. If you hear that in the background, that's my dog coming downstairs. And if you didn't hear that in the background, then I said nothing. That's good enough, I think, for now. We've gotten rid of the shading artifacts and things like that on the low poly, and it all looks pretty good. I think what I'm going to do is probably just run a quick test bake on this piece to make sure that everything is set up correctly. And I'll be back in a second. Okay, so when it comes to baking these days, I use object space normals, and I'll show you this in a little bit when we do the actual test bakes for real. But this is my test for the test bakes, I guess. It's a multi-layered, it's a multi-layered onion here. Just bear with me. So I've added a texture to my low poly material, and I've assigned it to be the object normal. So this just allows me to test to make sure that stuff is working the way I think it's going to work. So let's go ahead. Okay, what I need to do first, before I can bake, is create a cage. And it just means I go in my morph maps, I make a new vertex map called cage, and then I just use the push command to push the low poly out until it completely encompasses the high poly. There. I click it again to turn it off, and then we're done with that. So I'm going to get the render going here. And the way that, or the reason that I put a cage on there is that that's my standard operating procedure. I will always use a cage because I find that when you use a distance, like just putting in a distance value works most of the time, but you will end up with situations where you can't find a good distance that works for the entire mesh. So I just find a cage to be simpler. And you'll see that as I do more of the low poly, I'll add things to the cage, and you don't have to lose your old work. You don't have to redo it all. But we'll see that here in a second. Also, one of the great things about a cage is that if you have projection errors, and we'll see if we do or not, you can use the cage to fix a lot of it, because you can manually say, well, okay, this face is maybe straight this way a little more, which flattens out the projection, which can help fix skewing and that kind of stuff. But like I said, this is all predicated on how these test bakes turn out. So let's give this a shot. So low poly, high poly, visible, cage, okay. So I'll choose bake object to texture using my cage. Let's go. And it's all black, which is great. Why is that? I haven't UV'd it. Okay, let's create a texture map real quick. Wow. All right, let's clear that out. So when it comes to a test bake, I'm just going to go ahead and grab the top, give that a flat projection, flatten that out, hide that, select those, okay. Project that, align it, hide it, and I'll probably break these up into two rectangles. All right, hide that and project that. Not the best unwrap, but it's just for a test. So there's a quick little unwrap for this. Okay. Let's see if I have better luck baking this time. I don't. Okay, that's fun. Here's something that might catch you up when you're using MODO. Even though your low poly is on the screen because you have it selected, if it's not actually visible in the mesh list, it won't consider it for baking. It's one of those things that can say, you know, when you're recording a video for YouTube and the normal map's not baking, that might be the reason why. So make sure that's turned on. So let's go ahead and try it a third time. And let's see what happens. Hey, there's the normal map. Wonderful. So there's a little troubleshooting FAQ for you. All right, so you can even see from right here, you can see we've got our panel line etched in there. We've got the screw heads on the bottom. We'll close this out. We'll isolate the low poly, turn off the wireframe, and have a look. So we've got the panel line. Shading looks good. Screw heads look nicely projected. All right, I would say that's a win. So next up, we're just going to hammer through the rest of these objects, low polying, and I'll probably talk through a couple of them, and then we might do a time lapse for the rest of it. We'll see how it works out. So we're going to move ahead with the rest of this low poly work, and we're going to start with this piece because this is fairly straightforward. Now I'm not going to take this piece in the middle because I don't think it's worth doing that since it doesn't really contribute anything to the silhouette, and since this is going to be stuck on the surface, I don't think we need to worry too much about the underside at all. But we're going to worry about it some. We're going to worry about it the appropriate amount. How about that? So I'll give this the low poly material, and I'm going to hide the rest of the low poly mesh. Okay, so when a mesh is subdivided like this, I will sometimes freeze. Yeah, we'll go that way on this one. I'm going to freeze this mesh. Now my low poly mesh, I'll just show you this real quick. If I go to my LP material, wait, is it mesh? Wait, is it mesh properties? Surface properties. Okay. My Campbell-Clark subdivision on my low poly mesh is set to 1. Which might not be enough in this case, but typically I try to pick a 1 or maybe a 2, but just whatever is the bare minimum necessary to represent the the curvature of the shape. 1 is generally what I use, so I'm going to go with 1. You saw me toggling through different kinds, different subdivision levels there. That's because I have it on a hotkey. I hit it just that often. So okay, just for demonstration purposes, I am going to freeze this one. Sorry, I'm kind of waffling today. So we're going to freeze this off. Boom, and that adds a whole lot of of extra geometry in here, but I think in the end that's going to benefit us. So to speed working along, I'm going to merge those polygons together. Then I'm going to get rid of these because I don't really care. And then we're going to focus, I'm going to hide this. Here's one of those annoying things with MODO. MODO claims that it will only work on, or it'll only, tools operate on what's visible, right? But that's not always the case, because if I hide that patch of polygons and do a loop select here, it selects right across that that hidden area. And I wish it didn't do that. That's kind of irritating, to be honest. But we will deal with it. So I'm going to select every second edge. I think I could just use pattern selection and get all the way around the mesh. And we're going to kill that because that still leaves enough resolution on this outside ring to carry it. I'm going to kill those. That looks good. And now all of these are unnecessary. Now we do have to be aware of the hole where that little screw head went. I'm going to pop this out and just kill that segment. Actually, I'll just kill this entire face. Do a loop select. I'll deselect the top, bottom, bridge, and fill it in solid. Kill all those loops going around the outside. Kill. Let's see. That loop, those three, that one, or that one, probably that one, because it's starting to matter less and less the further down here we get. Now I'm going to leave this part for the end, and actually now that I look at it, I'm going to, never mind. We'll just leave it alone for now. And I go up here because I can see that you're collapsing every second one up here will be helpful. We'll hit that with quads, and I do believe see if I do this, we're losing a little bit of curvature across here, but I honestly don't think it's going to matter. And these are the kinds of decisions that you'll end up having to make. And maybe you'll end up regretting it, but in the worst case, all that I have to do is come back in here, recopy it down from the high poly, and just redo this area or redo this part of the low poly, which is not that much work. This, I wonder, so I keep hitting smart triangulate, which is just like a macro that I have built up. It doesn't do too much special. Okay, so now we have this bottom area. I'm going to set my view to the bottom, turn the high poly back on. Now we have that bottom polygon selected. I'm going to pull that in to just about there. Just, come on, just there. Flip back over here. Hit the bevel tool, pull that out till it kind of encompasses that bottom part. And that is going to be what I use for the low poly for this. We probably could go ahead and rip out, every second edge around here, but I'm not too fussed about it. We'll just quad that up. Is there a, no, there's not. Okay. All right, we're going to call that piece complete. And we'll maybe grab this thing. This is sort of how I work. I'm like, grab this piece, low poly it. Grab that piece, low poly it. Now, since this is Catmull Clark, I can just toggle back and forth with on, off. And if I can get, if it looks reasonably close, just turning off the Catmull Clark, then I'll just do that rather than freeze it. It's less work in the end. So I've turned off Catmull Clark, and I'm going to use push to push it in a little bit just so it more closely matches that high poly, but we're not going to get too fussy about it. Kill those edge loops. Kill these two edge loops. Yeah, all of these we can loop up to here. This sort of is something you need to be aware of when you're doing low polys too. Is sometimes you're tempted, not from an optimization point of view, but sometimes you're like, well, this doesn't really need to have Lattice doesn't need to have this area reduced. What's the big deal? But you do have to watch out for little tiny polygons on the normal map, or on your textures in general. Like if you have long, like this little polygon here and this little triangle, they're going to end up pretty small on the UV map. And unless you're baking a very high resolution normal map, that might end up costing you in the end, because you're going to end up with splooge and various problems, and sometimes it's just not worth the optimization. Just eat it, for lack of a better term. Just suck it up. That was clearly a mistake. But what I want to do is I want to kill these edge loops here. But I don't want that stuff up there killed, nor do I want these removed. So let's just turn those off. Delete that. Now we do end up with some weirdness here, but I think I could probably just turn these edges around so they have reasonable topology, and I think that will be just fine. Not perfect, but fine. And this over here, I'm actually kind of not proud of what I'm doing right now. This is kind of fiddly work that doesn't really need to be done, but it's stuff that my brain wants to do. So sometimes I just let my brain go off and do what it wants to do, and sometimes I come up with some some pretty cool thoughts. When you're doing something mindless, you're just like, well, now my brain can go off and wander and have a little vacation while I work on this. All right, for this, I know that this sits flush on this screw head, so I'm just going to grab those outside polygons and throw those into the low poly. I probably will freeze this because it's pretty coarse without it, but I'll kill those first and assign it the low poly material. All right, subdivision of 1, geometry freeze, do this, and now we have all those extra polygons around the outside. What I'm going to do is seal that up. Let's see if I got lucky on this, because we're bringing a round shape into a what is that? A six-sided shape, and then back into a round shape again. There's ways of doing this, but let's see if I can get lucky enough to have this work out. Okay, so if I grab all of those, where is that command for doing the it's not a line. It's hold on, let me find it. Hey, there it is. Linear, that's what I'm looking for. So to get these five-sided things to work out, there's 6 sides on this washer or whatever it's called. I'm not a hardware guy, but there's 36 sides on our cylinder, so that's 6 per side, and that works out nicely math-wise. So if I select 6 of those and hit linear, and then I want to turn on auto activate for that tool, that snaps that into a nice straight line. So I'm going to do the same for every round, for every bit of, sorry, every sequence of 6 sides. I'm going to go ahead and straighten that out linearly. Now, yes, this does take a little bit of pre-planning sometimes. And this time around, I just got lucky. I just happened to stumble into it, being the right size and everything. So, but once you have that set up, we can be like, all right, let's choose that as the radius, maybe a touch smaller, so it kind of hugs it. Right there looks good. Okay. That being the case, we're going to hit bevel, pull it up so it completely encompasses that shape. Hit bevel again and pull this in. Now we're going back to a circle, so I'm just going to hit the radial align, which I also want to set to auto activate. There we go. We can pull this in a little bit to about there. And then once again, we will hit bevel and pull it up so it wraps around the top. Now this does have a bevel up top, and I'm gonna respect that. So pull that up, give that a tilt in until it kind of hugs it a little closer. All right. Okay. This gives me a low poly mesh that's pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. What we can do now, granted, there's only, in this case, there's one of these. So in most cases, I wouldn't sweat this. But if you're like me, you're probably having, there's a little bit of eye twitching going on because you're like, what are all these extra edge loops running all through here? We'll get to it. Just hold on. I'm going to kill this polygon to make this part easier. Hide that. So we are hugging the shape pretty well. Let me hide those. Yeah, that'll bake fine. If you want to, if you really want, you know what, we're not going to do that. We'll deal with it later. On a piece, on a section that matters more. How about that? Okay. For this, I am going to, if I select all of these and just do an average collapse, that'll pull them all into the center of the face. And that's all that needs to be for this. Now, there is a possibility that we're going to run into a normal map bake issue because of, these skinny triangles that are being left in here. But I think it's actually worth it because if you look at the triangle count, we're at 368 here, okay? You're collapsing one of those rows takes us down to 360. Collapsing two, we go to 352. So for every time we collapse one of these sides, we save 16 triangles, and that actually can add up. Now this piece, I am wondering if we could get away with just killing every second edge. I'm willing to bet we could, to be honest. And I know, once again, this is a little overkill. But I'm going to do it because I think we're actually going to be saving ourselves some pain on the normal map in the end. Let's go ahead and just grab these. All right, good enough. And then we'll seal the top. The top actually needs to go in a little bit, I think, because that thing wants to sit down inside. But we're going to be rebels, and we're not going to do that because I think it'll hold up even without that. Once all the pieces are in place. Plus, we can fudge a little bit and have that switch sort of stick up a little. Like, let's say we've baked all this out and then we move the switch down to about here. I'm willing to bet that with the normal map and everything, that will sell visually. So we're going to go with it. And I'm going to go ahead and just low poly the rest of this. It's all the same techniques. And when I come back, we'll start talking about the UVs.